All right, today we're going to go over the maintenance and a PM kit on a Evoqua s10k. So the PM kit for this is going to be W3T99091. So that's for the automatic feeder with the s10k. So pretty simple to get within the kit. You're going to get most every single part to rebuild it. There is one part missing in the inside of the V-notch where there's an orifice plate, but it is easy to get that piece as well. So within the kit, you're going to get the lubrication too for all of the O-rings, and then all of the O-rings, and then everything you'll need for this kit. So the first thing I kind of like to do is I like to set out all of the O-rings that are in this kit, so that way it's easier to tell the sizes that you have inside of there. All right, so usually the first thing you want to do is obviously make sure that your gas is off. The other thing you can do is you can run the booster pump or whatever is creating your vacuum on there, shut off your gas, crack a fitting so that way you can suck all the gas out that's going to be inside of that rotometer before you do the maintenance on it. But assuming that you've cleaned out all of the gas and you're not running at that point, first thing to do is you're going to take out the V-notch. So you loosen up the nut on the actual actuator itself. So the actuator drives the V-notch up, and that's what gets your gas flow. So we're going to want to loosen up that nut, and then go ahead and get a pliers and take out the V-notch assembly. So within that, you have the rod that drives off the actuator that moves our V-notch. So the V-notch is the piece of plastic on the top side that's shaped like a V. So as it goes up, we get less flow at the bottom of the V, and as that V moves down, we get more gas flow. So the next part is the orifice plate. These orifice plates can wear out. They're a Teflon disc that basically does the sealing surface around the piece of plastic that's shaped like a V that controls our gas flow rate. Then you have the sealing O-ring, and then on the bottom side, we have another O-ring and then a Teflon, I call it the top hat, but that's what eventually seals up and when it gets choked off and tightened inside of there. So we got the bottom sealing section, and then the actual orifice plate, and then the O-ring that goes around there. So sometimes it can be tough to get that piece out. So usually what I do is I give it a quick tap. It'll pop up the orifice plate. I always remember that the orifice plate, one side's flat, one side's recessed. So recessed side goes to the top side. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to grasp the bottom section, top section, and we're going to unthread it. So we'll unscrew the V-notch from the rod itself. Take off, this is basically just a stopper, so it gets threaded on between the two pieces of the rod. Then we can loosen up the bottom and take it all the way off. Then you push up on the nut, and we can take off the top hat and the O-ring underneath. At that time, we're going to want to go ahead and get some paper towel, and we're going to want to wipe everything all down really good, clean it all up. So we want to hit the inside, we want to hit the whole housing, whole bottom. This is a brand new unit, so it's extremely clean. So just make sure that you get it well lubricated or well cleaned off. Next thing we want to do is go ahead and get a pick. We'll pick off all the O-rings. So then you just want to make sure that you match up old O-ring with the new O-ring so the same size. So for this, I'm actually just going to reuse the same O-ring. So we'll go ahead and put that O-ring on. Then you'd want to grab your new top hat and your new O-ring itself. What I usually do is just stick it together on there first. So we have our old one we're going to put back on for this one since it's brand new. So same thing, slid it on there. And then the easiest way to get those together is we'd want to make sure this was all clean and reassemble. So we'll put that piece on first. We then set the top hat with the O-ring on there first and use the actual threads itself to help center it first, tighten it, and then we can slide it down. And we'll want to make sure we take that back apart. So we need to make sure that we got that stopping Teflon inside there. So then we go from the bottom up. And we don't want to get too crazy with this thing, just finger tight should be good enough. We want to make sure we put on our Teflon stop, V-notch, thread that back on. Tighten that back up. Then grab our orifice plate, remembering that on the orifice plate we want to make sure that the notch sections on the top, flat's on the bottom. So flat goes to the bottom. We then successfully rebuilt our entire V-notch assembly. So we'll stick the assembly back up there. So tighten that back up. We attach our actuator back down. Now it can move freely. So for taking the glass out itself, you can get a wood chisel, a quarter will work with a wrench, or if you have a really wide screwdriver, all will work to take the glass out. So put it in the bottom. Then go ahead and pull our glass out. So glass pieces you're going to have you're going to have the top and bottom sealing O-rings. You're going to have the O-ring on the jack bolt. You're going to have the stopper and then the retaining spring on the bottom that holds in your float. Your glass might look larger or smaller depending on that, but you would still have most of the exact same things. This is a 500 pound per day unit, so it's pretty large. So we go ahead and want to grab our new O-rings for the top and bottom, our new O-ring for our jack bolt, and then you will get a new stopper. If you've got a smaller size glass, you might not have a stopper, you'd have a flat plate. You would just reuse the same flat plate. So biggest thing you're going to want to do is you'll remove the top stopper. Sometimes you can get pretty stuck on. So the biggest thing is you want to make sure whenever you're doing all these O-rings is that you're using grease and greasing all of the O-rings really well. Same thing on this top stopper. You want to make sure you put a nice layer of grease on the very top. It helps provide better sealing, and then also when you go to take it apart, it's a lot easier to get apart. So we'll go ahead and take the float out. You might have a float, you might have a red ball, black ball, depending on what size rotometer you have. So once we have everything apart, I want to go ahead and get paper towel, depending on what size you can have. Also, pipe cleaners work pretty well for cleaning the glass, but we're going to want to go ahead, run that through there, wipe the glass down as best we can, get it all cleaned out. Once we get the glass clean, I want to make sure we clean our float. Try not to touch the float if you've got greasy hands or anything else. So we're going to put the float back in. We're going to make sure we put it in with a paper towel. So we got our new stopper well greased. We're going to stick it in the top side. We're going to take our float or our ball, depending on what style we have. We're going to put that in without touching it. And go ahead and get our stopper, or our bottom stop. Slide that in there. Go ahead and grab our brand new O-rings, make sure they're well greased. So we've greased that top section, we've greased the O-rings. We greased the O-rings inside of the rest of this, so all O-rings get greased. We go ahead and pull off our bottom jack bolt O-ring. Get a new one of those as well, so put on the new O-ring there. So you come up from the bottom. And the question always gets asked, how do I know if this is tight enough? So what I like to do is we want to make sure that we grasp it with a paper towel. We want to make sure we can't spin it at all. So this one I can still turn a little bit, so we're a little loose. We give it a little quarter turn again. You can no longer spin that glass no matter what, how much pressure I put it on there. So next one we want to do is we take out we have another O-ring here, so I'll pick that O-ring off. Get the O-ring to replace that, so we would put that one on there. I always find it a good thing too, we want to grease the threads. So you can grease these threads and the threads that you're going to stick in there. It'll make putting it back together for assembly and disassembly a lot easier. So I have to thread that back in. And you might have some leftover pieces. So within these kits, they can do a multitude of different things. So if you do have a couple leftover O-rings and you know that you've replaced all the O-rings, it's not a big deal. Some of the add-on features that you can have for either a manual S10k or an automatic S10k, you know, you would have extra O-rings. But that is the disassembly and assembly of the S10k.